Okay, I'm here to talk about pair programming, supporting your junior devs right. Um, I'm gonna just there we go. My name's Kisha. I'm currently an associate software engineer at SPS Commerce. Um, but in my previous life, I was teaching at the college level for 20 years in physics and astronomy. I have a master's degree in science education as well. And those are some of the tools that I've been sort of reflecting on about pair programming. So I mentioned those specifically to do that. I'm going to talk about pair programming. I'm assuming you're here to hear about how to make pair programming a great experience for your junior devs. So that's what I'm coming, the perspective I'm coming from. That your plan is to help them out. Remember, you've hired your junior devs for a reason. You are investing in them, and your goal is to lift them up and help them shine and contribute. So when you think about that a little bit, what you want to think about are some of the challenges, right? You're coming to pair programming. Everyone's different. Everyone has different backgrounds. Everyone has different experiences. Maybe they came from a boot camp. Maybe they've got a computer science undergrad degree. Maybe they're self-taught. And hopefully we know that all of those tracks are valid as ways to get into tech. People are also coming to this role. Everyone, as in any situation, has different personalities. Um, but in talking with a lot of junior devs over the last year or so, almost all of us feel super nervous, super imposter syndrome, like, oh, I don't really know what I'm doing, or I don't want to look dumb, or things like that. But um, I think that that's super common. You just have to be aware of that. And the goal here is to kind of lower that nervous, kind of make it a little bit more chill. And to do that, you have to kind of remember that power differentials are a thing, and there's really just no magic answer for pair programming because everybody's a little bit different. And I do want to just point out that nervous imposter syndrome, particularly for marginalized communities and marginalized people, a lot of that has been baked in. Like, it's not like, oh, I can't do this. It's like, I have been told my entire life that this is not for me. So just keep in mind some of those axes of power that you've got going. So let's talk a little bit about some things that we can do to kind of help make pair programming good for your junior devs. One of the things that I find helpful is to have a team working agreement. Um, and now, maybe you don't have a team working agreement. This is maybe you don't have the corporate culture, but you can even just sort of bring this down to just the pair level. Make things nice and set expectations for the pair programming itself. But if you do have buy-in from your team and from your managers, it really does make things easier to pair. There was a great mini Ask Me Anything on pair programming on Wednesday that sort of talked about like how do you get that buy-in and some of the other tools that people use. Um, but one of the main things is to build trust. So just to pull a couple of things out of my team working agreement, this isn't the whole agreement, but this is just some of the things we find are important. Communicate and don't assume. In fact, err on the side of over communication, where you're really kind of trying to make sure everyone's on the same page. We think as a team, there shouldn't be any specialists. I don't own this piece of code. My teammate doesn't own that piece of code. We communicate, we share, we knowledge share, super important. And my team also believes that everyone helps everyone. Don't be afraid to ask is literally in our agreement. And I really like this piece. Shared excitement about being one of today's 10,000. And if you haven't seen the XKCD that this refers to, congratulations, you're one of today's 10,000. You can see it down here. It's XKCD 1053. And basically, the idea is that nobody knows everything. So if you don't know something, cool, let's learn it. So highly recommend that that is the mentality that you foster, that a shared value of learning is part of your team. And even if, again, even if it's not part of your corporate culture, even if it's not part of your team culture, you can still foster that in the pairing. Like, this is really what we're doing. We're gonna do this together. That's a huge piece of this. Um, Part of that fostering of the trust is to make sure that you talk about what best works for you, set expectations, and just take time to get to know the other person. Especially like as you're onboarding people, it's important to just kind of get to know each other before you start pairing. So, as a senior dev, something you can do that helps as well, in addition to setting expectations and building trust, then you can also think ahead. What are you trying to do in this particular pair? And even if you don't have time to think about it a lot, even if you take together 5 minutes with the other person and say, okay, what are we trying to accomplish in this particular pairing exercise? Are we trying to learn the code base? Are we trying to teach a concept? Are we trying to build a piece of the code? Are we trying to debug? All of these things are things you could be pairing. I'm sure there's plenty of other things. But if you have a goal in mind, it really can help narrow down your focus. Um, it's super important that you keep that scope as you're pairing and that you don't just sort of let things balloon and sort of tangent out of control, because that can be super overwhelming for your junior dev. Once you have an idea of what you're trying to do, you can think a little bit about, okay, what scaffolding do I need for this process? Do I need key concepts? What context is needed? And context, maybe just like this little piece of code and a couple of other things, but not like the whole code base. Or maybe you need to even bring in some of the business context, depending on what you're doing. But if you already have a goal in mind, it's much easier to think about which pieces do I need. And you can also think about what tools do you need for the task? What tools do I need to teach the task? What tools do I need? Not just the IDE, but maybe we want a whiteboard or something like that. But again, focus paring down what it is that you're doing in this particular instance. It can be super overwhelming if you start wandering off on various tangents. So you've prepared ahead and you thought, oh, wait, I forgot to ask them, how do they learn? And I want to just take a little bit of a step into sort of things I know from my teaching, and talk a little bit about learning styles. Are they a thing? And they kind of are, and they kind of aren't. So you probably have heard someone say, oh, I'm a really visual learner, or, oh, I just need to like sit and focus and read something for a little bit. I'm a big picture person, or I really like to dive into the details. There's lots of different types of ways people learn. And these are all valid, and there's certainly probably more than I put on this slide. But what I really want to just say is most people actually do best if you use a combination of things. And you don't have to use all of them in every single session. But if you can kind of like bring in a couple of different ways of doing something, it'll stick a little bit better. And similarly, personality styles, you might hear something like, oh, I'm super introverted or super extroverted. That's a common thing right now. People talk about, oh, I need my recharge time. But introvert, extrovert, empathy. I'm need to super logic this whole thing. All of those pieces. Again, most of us are in fact a combination. We need a little bit of everything. So kind of think about that and sort of mix things up, and always, always, always be checking in. And so you see this on the next slide, where we talk a little bit about techniques, things to think about while you're actually in the pairing. So just what you were waiting for, pairing tips. Big one, check in often. Pay attention to your junior devs' reactions. If they're sort of starting to fade or get tired, or if they look frustrated, like just take a step back and be like, hey, maybe we need just a little break. It's fine. Again, sometimes you can be caught up in the, oh, I'm going to talk through this concept and, talk through this, and then we'll jump into this, and then we'll follow it here. And 5 minutes later, you look back and you're like, hey, do you have any questions? And maybe they had 12 questions, but you were talking too much that they didn't feel like they could interrupt. So slow it down. Take some time. It's okay. Give time to ask questions. Make sure that they're, again, that you're checking in. That kind of thing can be really helpful if you also take a moment and be like, hey, why don't you walk through this loop or this function, and why don't you tell me what you're thinking? Have them talk it through, and then maybe they can be like, okay, so I see this and I see that, but I'm not sure what this particular piece does. And then that's a question where you can kind of help them through that. If they're explaining something to you, then you will have a better way or an easier way of figuring out where they're stuck, and you can kind of skip over the pieces where they already understand things. Assume competence. That's another big piece. There was a discussion on Twitter not too long ago about how you might assume competence in different ways to ask, do you know something or do you not know something? And sort of in this discussion, I sort of brought this to a group, and we talked a little bit about it's super important to normalize that it's okay not to know everything. But also you want to normalize that, hey, we hired you for a reason, right? You're here, we're learning, you're learning, it's fine. But I assume that you can learn. And we talked about like different ways to ask that question. And we sort of thought about maybe it's a little bit more about how you ask it, like tone. But mostly it's about, did you build that trust? Is it a thing where you find that they're scared to ask because they don't know you well enough yet? Again, emphasizing that, hey, it's okay. We're here. We're going to talk about things. We're doing this together. So that's kind of a thing that you want to make sure that you're sort of aware of. Asking how they want to approach the question at hand can actually be sort of a good way. Then they can say, hey, I'm usually a big picture person, but on this one, I actually want to dive into the details because I think I already have the big picture. Or, maybe they want to go big picture even if they are details. It changes how people want to approach something. So giving your junior dev some agency will really go a long way to building that trust. So, a few more pairing tips before my poor kitty here falls asleep on the keyboard. Just a little bit. Don't hover behind them. Pretty much everyone I talked to finds this incredibly stressful. And in the mini Ask Me Anything, someone said, this isn't really pairing. And I kind of thought a little bit about it. I was like, yeah, it kind of isn't, because you're sort of there behind them and not sort of on an equal footing. So, get yourself physically on an equal footing if you can. Now, I understand that we're all in Zoom now, and this is a little bit challenging. You're not going to hover behind someone because you're Zooming anyway. But just think about that sort of, even sort of virtually, what's going on. Having someone watch you code, it can be really, really daunting. So think a little bit about how you might work that up. And I hope that you can look up some resources on this remote pairing, because that companies have been doing remote stuff for a long time. So they've got to have some tips and tools, right? So I don't have those myself, but hopefully you can look some of that stuff up. And the last little bit that I kind of want to touch on is as your junior dev is like coding, they're trying to absorb, they're trying to read the lines, they're trying to parse the lines, they're trying to figure out all of these things and figure out what things are doing. And they might not feel like comfortable, or they might not notice that they're starting to actually like fade a little bit. So if you as a senior dev can kind of take that emotional labor, take that off of them and manage saying, hey, let's take a break. Hey, let's change things up. It actually will help a lot. Again, communication, empathy for your junior devs. Don't make it your junior dev's job to manage you. I know that a number of times, I hear a lot of advice to junior devs. Oh, you really have to advocate for yourself. You have to make sure that your senior, devs pay attention to your needs. Junior devs, if you're listening to this, absolutely you will need to do those sometimes. And it's great to think ahead about how you might approach that. But senior devs, really, if you can think about taking that load off of your junior devs, it would be fantastic. So a couple of different things to think about there. I just want to say thank you to so many people who did not even make this slide because I ran out of space. But MinneStar in particular, a bunch of people from the Ask Me Anything on Wednesday. It was a great talk. Go listen to it. Other people that I've come and asked a bunch of questions and have helped me prep this talk, and of course my awesome team. So thanks very much, and I'll take questions in the chat.
All right, who's got some questions on the topic of pair programming? We have about 3 minutes. This is a really hot topic. As Kisha mentioned, we had an AMA on it on Wednesday that had a really good conversation. So here's a great opportunity to put some questions for Kisha in the chat and get them answered in real time.
Oh, there's a question.
All right. One of the questions, I'll read it and then you can answer, Kisha. Any getting started in pair programming book recommendations? I want to dive in a bit deeper.
That is a fantastic question, and I will say that all my pair programming stuff that I've learned, I've basically Googled pair programming. With anything, I think that you really want to think about, I read an article, think about what'll work for you, think about what won't work for you. It's kind of a little bit tricky because, I haven't been trained in pair programming. I don't know that anybody really is. I think it would be super great if someone did some workshops about how to effectively pair program. So that would be great. Yeah. Sorry, I have a
That's great. Another question came up from Bridget, who said, if someone's getting started in pairing, what's a really important starting point?
I think the most important piece is getting to know the other person. So at SPS, we do a personality thingy, which is kind of fun. It involves Legos and it's a little bit more in depth than like the what is it, MBT, the thing where you come up with int J and stuff. So it really does like show you that people have a wide range of personalities, and it gave us a lot of techniques for working with people who are different personalities. Now you might not have that, but I think that there's definitely like get to know someone and asking them how do you work best. Switching up pair programming too among the team, that was a suggestion in the AMA, and I think that was great. We definitely pair with everybody in our team, which is really cool.
I love it. Well, thank you again, Kisha. A really, really important topic. Lots of good comments and affirmations in the chat. And so thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, thank you.